My wife and I came here with literally nothing, but we were given a chance to start a new life all over again by this country.
In this episode of my podcast, Relentless Life on Your Terms, I am joined by Vedran Drakulić, who is the CEO of the Gandalf Philanthropy Group, and he's been working there since December 2011. We talk about his journey from a humanitarian to working to the Red Cross, to working in RSV, and now to the Gandalf Group. He's one of the highest fundraisers in Vinnies, and he's participating in his 8th Vinnies CEO campaign. Good friend of mine, an amazing giving human being. This is one episode you don't want to miss. Welcome to this episode of my podcast, Relentless Life on Your Terms. I'm sitting here with a very special guest and friend of mine, Vedran. Vedran, thanks for joining us.
Great to see you, Chris.
Now, Vedran's currently the CEO of the Gandalf Philanthropy Group and has been since December 2011. When you arrived in Australia, Vedran, give us a timeline of the roles you've been doing that led you into the Gandalfs.
Thanks very much, Chris, for this opportunity. It's really great to talk to you. We've known each other for a while now, particularly around the Vinnies CEO sleepout, and it's really great to have the opportunity to chat to you. My journey to Australia has been very interesting. I might talk about that a little bit more, but I came to Australia in 1995 as a refugee under the Australian government's humanitarian resettlement program. I'm originally from Sarajevo in Bosnia, and as you might remember, and your listeners and viewers might know, there was a very vicious war happening in the Balkans in the early 90s, and I got caught up in that in my hometown of Sarajevo, and eventually managed to come to Australia as a refugee. First job that I had here was with the Red Cross, and that was partially because during the war in Bosnia, I ended up by chance working for the International Committee of the Red Cross, which was there to provide humanitarian assistance to the victims of war. And through that time, I really developed the love of humanitarian work and actually helping people in need. So when I came to Australia, I decided that I would like to try and pursue a similar career. So I started with the Red Cross as a public affairs assistant, as they say, from the bottom, and then worked my way up to become public affairs manager, which for those who don't know involves really working with the media and in communications, but also very importantly fundraising. So my team and I were responsible for raising funds for all the international emergencies and disasters. After about 5 years in that role, I went to Geneva, which is the global headquarters of the Red Cross in Geneva in Switzerland. Worked there for a couple of years, trying to develop their humanitarian diplomacy work, which is basically working with governments to convince them to promote humanitarian work, and particularly the laws of humanitarian assistance around the world. Then came back to Australia, worked with the Red Cross for a few more years, and then moved to Oxfam, Australia, which is the International Development Agency, which tries to help people in developing countries really get out of poverty. And that was very interesting work. But after that, I thought I need to get some corporate experience in Australia, because a lot of my work was in that humanitarian / not-for-profit sector. So I managed to get a job. I landed a really good role with the RACV, the Royal Automobile Club of Victoria, a very known brand, I think, particularly in Victoria, and worked there as General Manager of Public Affairs for about 4 or 5 years. The interesting thing about that role, I often say, I joke about it, that anything that anyone didn't want to do in RACV, they dumped it into public affairs, which was an interesting conundrum, but also great learning experience.
Good problem solving, though.
Exactly, and also great learning experience because we covered such a broad remit in the public affairs department, from obviously media and communications, but also internal communications, supporting the corporate social responsibility of the work that RACV does, as well as corporate hospitality, events and functions, and so on. But I always wanted to go back to the humanitarian world. So when the opportunity came up, I applied for the job with Gandalf Philanthropy. I knew of the Gandalf family, but I didn't know much about their philanthropic work. So when I explored it a bit further, I realized that it's a family that's very committed to giving back
Just for our listeners, the Gandalf family, tell us a bit about them and who are they?
So Gandalf family, basically the patriarch and the matriarch are John Gandalf and Pauline Gandalf. John came here, or his parents, I should say, came here as migrants from Poland in the early 30s. John was born here. And they were really, they came here because they were trying to flee what they were sort of thinking might happen in the future, which we know subsequently did happen, which was the Second World War and the Holocaust, which decimated the Jewish population, particularly in Europe, but also in other parts of the world. And they sort of came as really sort of migrants that didn't have much here and started from scratch. John subsequently inherited some of the work that his mother and father sort of started, and with his brother-in-law created an empire, really, which was the Suzanne Group. And then subsequently he sort of pulled away from that. He sold his stake and went into retail real estate, and that's where he made his biggest mark.
Of course.
Particularly with the Chadstone Shopping Centre, the fashion capital, as we know.
Yeah, it is.
But also other retail work. And as they say, he received a few years ago the Hall of Fame from the Property Council of Australia for basically what they said, fundamentally redefining the shopping experience in Australia.
100%.
Which I think is true.
What a cool thing to win too.
Exactly.
For a migrant that just came from overseas.
Absolutely, amazing stuff. But also very early on, even in those days when they were not, that rich, but they were sort of starting to be well off, both his parents, and he inherited that, and I believe his children and grandchildren also, they knew that they wanted to give back. There is that thing in the Jewish culture and Jewish heritage about giving back, about tzedek, which is to support others in need, and John and Pauline in particular were always huge supporters. And it's a great story actually how they started their foundation. It was started in 1978 with the initial investment of $10,000. Today, as we speak, 1978. Today, as we speak, that foundation has grown so much that we give away, or they give away, $15 million a year, every year.
Which is incredible. To put that into perspective, all that growth. And I also read that they do up to $100 million worth of philanthropy work. A lot of people don't know this.
Well, that's true.
They think it's the owner of Chadstone, that's it.
And they are, quiet givers as well. They are not out there to do this for the accolades or for people to pat them on the back. They really want to just, literally, as John often says, simply improve our society and give those that are less fortunate an opportunity to succeed in life. And I think that's a wonderful ethos. It's not about, giving people charity just to, help them get by. It's actually trying to give them an opportunity to make life better for themselves.
Well, let me ask you, you've always had an affinity of helping people, human services, philanthropy. One start, you're raising money, now giving money. What part of that what draws you to that sort of work? I know you as a person, so you're very giving. Even the first day I met you at Vinnies, I came and asked you questions. Because he's the top fundraiser, by the way. I think it's the last 4 years in Victoria, one of the best in Australia. And I asked him some questions, and he was very forthcoming with the techniques he did, the information that he provides people, and how he raises more money, which I always found. I look at it, even on my glass table I have an open palm, because I think what's open can receive, but also give. So exactly. I find you very much that way. So can you tell me what that was?
So look, first of all, you asked about, why do I do this?
Yes.
I guess one of the big things, as I mentioned earlier, for me was literally discovering this whole world of humanitarian assistance when I was in the war in Sarajevo in Bosnia, and understanding that there is this huge ecosystem of humanitarian organizations there to help people in need. But also particularly coming to this country as a refugee, where my wife and I came here with literally nothing. But we were given a chance to start a new life all over again by this country. They didn't know us. We were one of probably thousands of people that apply every year. They chose us and they gave us this chance. We came here, and ever since that time, I feel this kind of in a desire to give back and to repay that debt of gratitude that I feel towards Australia. So that's why I feel that I want to do more for people struggling in Australia. In terms of just kind of fundraising, as I mentioned to you, I was a organized professional fundraiser for many years, particularly with Red Cross, then also with Oxfam. But this work with Vinnies is very much about homelessness, and that is something that the Gandalf family again has been very committed and very involved in for many, many years, and in particular youth homelessness. So they're trying to break that sort of cycle of poverty that starts sometimes with some people very early on, and it might not start as homelessness, it will start as poverty, but it can descend into homelessness, and they are trying to do that. And there are many organizations that are great in Australia that do that, but we sort of landed on Vinnies simply because I know them quite well. You know, I always with work in philanthropy, you do due diligence on your organizations that you want to support, and they really stacked up very well. We did site visits to their programs and their facilities they have, and we decided that that's something that we should support as Gandalf Philanthropy. So their big development that they did of Ozanam House, we supported the Homelessness Resource Center there and a number of other programs. But I also thought, well, this is great, but maybe, you know, I should walk the talk. Just like you do, I think, now with CEO Sleepout. So that's how I joined the Sleepout a few years back and said, I want to do, you know, something directly involved there and walk the talk. So that's how I got involved with the Sleepout.
I guess which you have been, and you've been pivotal to the fundraising efforts over the last few years. I've been doing 4 years. This is my 4th year. This is your 5th, 6th?
7th year.
Oh, sorry, stand corrected, 7th year. And so tell me a bit about that. You started 7 years ago. That what I did when I first went there, Vedran, I said, someone told me, you got to do this Vinnies thing, got to do this Vinnies. I said, no, I don't want to do it, because I always had an affinity with homeless people. They said, why don't you want to do it? I said, a lot of people do what I feel to get attention or to get tax deductions. I don't want to do it. They go, please do it 1 year. So I did it. And that year I'd raised $40,185. And my one goal was, I want to speak to the organisation. Yeah. Where does the money go? How many volunteers? Is it non-profit? Because a lot of companies, not that much money goes back. I was that impressed with what I saw. I think it was Sue or Jen I spoke to at the time. I don't remember. I was that impressed. I said, you know what? I'm going to sign up for another 5 years. And because it's one of these companies that does so much for homelessness, and a large, I think it's 97% volunteer rate they've got there.
Yeah, that a huge percentage, yes.
What were some of the factors when you were looking for a company like this to spend your time and money? What were some of the factors that swayed you to say, this is a great, because they were my factors. What were yours?
Look, you nailed it already. You know, when we look at these sorts of things from the philanthropic perspective and with a philanthropic lens, it is similar things. We want to know, one and foremost, that there is impact, that they are actually doing something that creates a difference in people's lives, and secondly, that they do it effectively and efficiently. They are sort of the top things. But also, you know, in a way, you know, what you said, what I felt with this particular event that really is amazing, you know, I work in philanthropy, I live and breathe that space, so I know what it means, at least a little bit more than the average person, what it means to be homeless and what are the challenges and obstacles and how that can happen.
Because you're more educated towards it because you see it.
Yeah, that's what because it's my job to know that.
Yeah.
But the average person in the street might not be aware. And I think that part of this program, which is of course raising money, but it's also raising awareness about the challenges of homelessness. And you would have seen that every year. The best part, I think, of the whole program is when all those people who are corporate leaders, who are CEOs, who are bosses and managers, sit down on that night before we go to our sleeping bags to sleep on concrete, but they get to hear from people with lived experience how it happened to them, then they ended up being homeless. And over the years, we've seen people that were doctors, that were nurses.
I was dumbfounded with some of these stories, CEOs, and how they ended up in that. I was
managers.
Amazed. Never in a million years.
Exactly. You know, it just simply shows it can happen to anyone.
100%.
And it's not because they wanted it to happen to them. It's just a set of circumstances that makes it like that. And what Vinnies do is try to get them back on track. So I think that's really the value of this program. And I remember distinctly one year we had one person who stood up and said, look, why can't we just build 10 buildings and give them each an apartment and put them in there? That is just one part of the solution. It's very important to have stable housing, but you have to provide wraparound service.
Keep the housing.
Caring,
100%.
mental health, substance abuse, employment, training, all of those
100%.
things. And that's what Vinnies do. But also that person that asked that question, by the end of that session, I spoke to him and he said, now I understand. It's not as simple as just giving them an apartment. It's great, they need it, but there are all these other things that need to happen.
Skill sets, tools. Yeah. Someone needs a car, you give them a car, and they don't know how to drive, they don't need petrol, they need insurance.
Exactly.
It's the same principle.
Absolutely.
But I
You're
guess
spot on. Yeah.
But it's what you said as well. It's coming from not an uneducated point of view of that. In somewhat ignorant, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I remember when I did the Vinnies CEO last year, when it was due to COVID, I slept 2 nights out in Melbourne just so I can experience it. And 3 people approached me, my wife, she was actually quite taken back by it. And I remember this one girl approached us, had one tooth, obviously she had a bit to drink. She was on the streets for 13 years and she was only 29, and I don't think I'll ever forget that. One person just got incarcerated. The amount of luck and the cycle that just keeps going round and round, I thought to my wife, can you believe that? People would walk past and think, why didn't you get a job? Why didn't you do something?
Yeah.
13 years they've been living on the street.
Yeah.
And it's just bad circumstance after bad. And I was up all night with her because she was very scared to sleep because we were getting approached. And I said, most time you walk past people and they're sleeping in the middle of the day and you're thinking, why aren't you awake now? Why shouldn't you be looking for work? It's because at night time, they're terrified. They're sleeping during the day. They're scared that their shoes are going to be stolen. They're scared someone's going to rob them. So you don't understand it until you actually understand the breakdown of why someone's there. Could you imagine being 29 years old and being on the streets for 13 years?
Yeah. And believe me, Chris and everybody that's watching this, there is one thing that we know for sure. Nobody wants to be homeless on purpose.
Of course.
That's absolutely clear. So these are the people that if they're given proper support and chance, they will turn their lives around. And we see that, as you said, and as we saw every year, we see those people when Vinnies bring them to tell their story and to show us how they helped them and how they managed to turn their lives around.
Yeah, and as I said, every time I see it, it gets me emotional because I do actually say it's a set of circumstances that could happen to absolutely anyone. And the stories that you hear, I've never heard one of them and thought, wow, I can't believe this person's homeless.
Yeah.
The one that we heard the last time, the guy was on fire and he lost all his opportunities. The one we were watching with Vinnies, that's when we got interrupted and the people came up to us. But the fear my wife felt because she thought they were going to rob us. They were just coming to talk to us, really. Let me ask you something. If you could have one gigantic billboard somewhere and it could write anything, metaphorically speaking, what would you say on that billboard and where would you locate it?
So, interesting question. I never thought of that, but I am a big believer in the concept of paying it forward. So I would say, pay it forward. I think it's really important. And you are one of the people leading by example that pay it forward. We are so blessed in this country. Often, one of the things that I think about is that a lot of Australians really do not understand enough or appreciate how good we have it here compared to many other parts of the world. And I wish for every single Australian, if they could go to a developing country and spend a week there at least, and then come back and ask them, what do you think about this place? I know that all of them will say, we are so lucky that we live here. But there are people that are struggling in Australia as well. And the ones that are not struggling and that we are enjoying the spoils of this great country, what we can do is pay it forward. So that would be my billboard.
I love pay it forward. It's a great billboard. And it is a good thing to go overseas. I was telling my wife when the kids get a bit older, I'd like to take them overseas to live for a week and just experience exactly what you have. Because you don't know the other side of the coin until you're there. And in most cases...
You can see it on TV, you can read about it, you can understand it a little bit, but until you go there and kind of meet the person, living in Cambodia or in Somalia or in countries like that, Afghanistan, and some of those countries you can't even go to, but there are places where you can go and really witness how people live, sometimes on $1.50 a week, and then you get the sense of the difference of quality of life that we have here.
It puts things into perspective, and I think there's no book, no TV that can actually give you that experience if you live there.
Yeah.
That's why I said I love to take my kids. Me and my wife have discussed this on numerous occasions, because if they live there for a week, I think their gratitude level will go up by default.
I have no question. Yeah.
In the last 5 years, what belief, behaviour or habit has most improved your life?
In the last 5 years, I guess really in the context of my professional work, it's never give up. I think that was always something that I feel. The challenge in philanthropy is that we have only limited resources, and there is so much need out there.
Which you might be talking about time, you might be talking about money, you might be talking about contacts, whatever it may be.
But also particularly that whole space of social welfare and support for the community. Gandalf philanthropy funds in a broad range of areas, from arts and culture to education and scholarships. I mentioned youth at risk, health and medical research, and so on. So we try to help.
Do you play a part in those sections, or do you mainly focus on the homeless side?
That's all covered by me and my team.
And you decide where to allocate funds based on, is that how it works?
I don't decide. What we do, me and my team, we come up with ideas, proposals and suggestions to the board of Gandalf Philanthropy, and John and Pauline are both on the board, one of their daughters as well, Lisa Turin, and a couple of external board members, and they make the final decision. Like in many other companies, you will have the board making final decisions, but my team and I, what we try to do is come up with good, interesting ideas, proposals and programs for them to fund and to support.
To invest in.
Yeah. So to me, when I said never give up, it's about understanding what each organization does, how they do it, and finding ways in which we can support them to do what they do even better and more of. Yeah, so that's one of the sort of learnings that I've had.
I got that from you, because when I asked you, when you said you send out, and I said that to Alicia this year, 3 months when my Vinnies campaign comes out, I hit very hard and I raise money. But I said, when I spoke to Vedran, he told me all year round he sends information to all of his people that donate. It's a much nicer approach, because it's not you want this client or this person donating money to obviously give you year in, year out. And the way I think I approach it, I need to become more like you in the sense. Yeah. I don't want to just speak to people for 3 months. Maybe I should be sending them things 12 months around.
Look, Chris, everybody approaches these things in a different way, but I know personally from my own experience, I hate it when I get the mail out from a charity only once a year in May or June in the lead up to the end of the financial year asking for money. And for the rest of the 11 months, I don't hear anything. That's one thing. The second thing that I always do, which I know is really powerful, is I always thank every single donor right away with a personalized message.
I do too.
It's not a message like, generic one, with a personalized message. And I'm very pleased to say I feel privileged and immensely grateful that of all the donors that I have had over these years, I would say, I never counted it properly, but I would say definitely more than 50% and maybe up to 80% are repeat donors. They would be giving year after year.
And that's because obviously the way you are and you treat them.
I hope so, and I hope also that it's because they believe in the cause.
Of course, it goes both ways. Yeah. Now, leads me to this year, Vinnies CEO campaign. What's your targets this year?
My target officially is $50,000, but that is before the matching. As you know, I had been really fortunate that my boss, John Gandalf, for the past few years has always promised to match 2 for 1 all the money that I raise. So every donation that I raise basically triples in value thanks to Gandalf Philanthropy and Gandalf family. So my target is 50, which means I'm hoping to raise altogether $150,000.
which put him. You're number one in Victoria for many years now, weren't you? I know I've been
Yes.
doing this for 4 years,
Yeah.
and you were number one every year. And I remember year 2, you said, I want someone to stand up and take that title.
I hope that, it's not about being number one, it's just raising as much money as I possibly can.
But that's what
with
you
the
said.
help.
You never came off that way
Yeah.
that you about the number one.
Yeah.
You came off as when you said that speech, you want someone by your side to bring in more reach.
Exactly.
And I appreciated that.
I said I would love dearly for somebody else to take the mantle and be the top top fundraiser, simply because that means more money will be raised. And I will still do my bit, but I would like others to also raise as much money, because it all, as you know very well, it all goes to Vinnies, and
It's a
they
great
do
cause.
amazing work. Yeah,
It's competition without opposition.
exactly.
Now, for me, I want to make very, very clear, it is about impact and I want to raise more money, but I do want to be number one and beat Vedran as well. So I'm going to need your help. But more importantly, I love working alongside you. You're very open with your information, Vedran. You're an unbelievable fundraiser. I do want to mention, I also went to the CEO, it was in the Palladium room.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear a philanthropy award comes up, and I'm sitting near the table, there's about 30 tables. Vedran name comes up, and I go, I hope he wins it, and you won that award as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
So
that was the
fantastic.
CEO magazine
CEO
annual
magazine,
awards.
that's it.
Yeah, so it was in the not-for-profit category, and very humbling, really wonderful, to get that. But it's a recognition, I think, for the whole not-for-profit sector and the work that many organizations, both charities and foundations, do to make our society better. But let me just give you a plug, guys, girls, everybody else. Please support Chris.
Thank you very much. Even if you support me, dollar for dollar, $2 for every dollar you raise, or any of our CEOs, please get behind us. If you're a CEO that wants to do Vinnies CEO Sleepout, 17th of June, we need you. All your donors, thank you very much for donating money, sharing our link. We can't do it without you. It's going to be a big year this year. We're hoping to beat, I think it's 7.3 million we raised 2 years ago. We're hoping to beat that record, so please give generously. Thank you very much. Quick fire questions, they're just silly questions, you'll probably see them right. Now, Vedran, are you ready for the quick fire questions?
I'll try my best.
Who would play you in a movie of the story of your life? Which actor?
Ooh. I will say Mark Wahlberg, simply because I was told that I look like him or he looks like me, whichever way. So I would say Mark Wahlberg.
I've got a photo with Mark, I'll show it after this. Any tattoos?
No.
Best gift you've ever received?
The best gift, I would say probably the cufflinks that I received from my parents when I completed my master's degree in public advocacy and action at Victoria University here in Australia.
So you like cufflinks?
I love cufflinks.
Excellent.
And thank you for the gift, because I saw them already.
Good. Now, if you have one superpower, what would it be?
To make people do good deeds. That would be my wish for the superpower.
It's a great superpower. If you could have dinner with 3 people, living or dead, who would you have at your dinner table?
Kind of eclectic group maybe, but I will go with all the people that are dead. So I would go with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I never met the woman, but I think she would be amazing. Albert Einstein. I have so many questions to him about relativity. And Nelson Mandela, because I think he is the epitome of a good person that has the heart as big as a mountain.
It says a lot about that. Now, if you get a spare ticket, can I join?
Absolutely.
Excellent. One strange fact that nobody knows about you.
One strange fact, I always use this one. I pulled out my own tonsils.
That's
I used, just so you know, not deliberately, but it was done with a coat hanger. So there is a coat hanger that, the old coat hangers, wooden ones, had little hooks on the side for skirts. I was playing as a kid, I was maybe 10, and it was in my mouth, and somehow it went deep in, and I pulled it out, I yanked it, and I yanked my tonsil out.
I think every listener's just thrown away every coat hanger that they have. Oh,
Don't
my God.
watch this at breakfast.
Oh, now, One key takeaway you want for our listeners, from our podcast, what's one key takeaway, one message?
I like to say this to everyone. I work in philanthropy, and often people associate big foundations and lots of money with philanthropy. Everyone can be a philanthropist. Whether you give $1 or $1 million a year, that is philanthropy. Whether you give 1 hour of your time or 100 hours a year, that is philanthropy as well.
Of course.
I would like every single person to become a philanthropist.
It's just the kind deed. Everything starts somewhere.
Absolutely.
Now, I feel...
And if I can add, whatever you give, whatever you put in, you will get back 10 times more.
If you're not expecting to get anything back. Now, I feel like my father going to tell you a bit of history. You know where the origin of philanthropist comes from?
Yes, Greek word.
Of course.
Love of humanity.
Yeah, which so that's for you, Dad. That one. It always gives me useless facts. Best advice you've ever received?
Best advice is always ask the question. I think that's really important. My big mentor for many years, he's now gone, he's no longer with us, Jim Carlton, former politician, he said always ask a question. Whatever it is, don't be shy, never assume, ask a question. And that goes for philanthropy, but also everything
Work,
else in life.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Now, finally, 1 to 10, how much have you enjoyed this podcast?
Probably 11. It's been fantastic. Chris, again,
We're
thanks for
biased.
the opportunity, but really great to talk to you, and hopefully the viewers will enjoy this as well.
They definitely will. And the final last question, give me 3 key takeaways for our conversation that you want the listeners to remember from our conversation. I think I know 1 or 2 of them, but please share them with us.
Takeaways. It's always great to talk to people that you know and try and understand a little bit more about them. And this is a great opportunity for you and me to understand each other. Get involved, give back. You will always receive more than what you can possibly expect. And as I mentioned before, anyone can be a philanthropist. I think that's probably what sums it up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vedran.
Thanks again, Chris.